Welcome. Thanks for tuning in to the MMA podcast, Friday, June 29th. Joined, of course, by P Money at Sweet Pappy Jones. Pat, how are you?
Big Jake, it is a fantastic Friday. My love for alliteration never stops, no matter what day it is. Man, ready for this weekend. How you doing?
A fantastic Friday, a freaky Friday. We're doing good. We're doing good. We're doing podcasts on back-to-back days. Who would have thunk? The MMA podcast, back-to-back days. What? That's right. It's the start of a new thing we're trying out. Shorter episodes, but more episodes. Today we're going to be talking about we teased it a little bit yesterday, but all these retirements. We got Lyoto Machida. He didn't retire, but he moved to Bellator. We'll start with the surefire UFC Hall of Famer, not Machida, although he probably is one. Rashad Evans, from Tough 2 fame, had a title run there at 205, moved down to 185, was struggling, lost his last fight on the prelims. Didn't it doesn't look like there's a title run or really, things have not been good for Rashad Evans the last few fights. I'm trying to figure out a way to word it nicely, but yeah, it's been a rough go for Rashad Evans. Probably the right time to hang up his gloves. What do you think about when he will most definitely be in the Hall of Fame just because I think he was a part of that 205 title run from it was Tito for the longest time, then it was Chuck, then who took the belt from Chuck? Rampage? No. Who took the belt from Chuck?
It was Evans. No.
I think Rampage.
Yes.
Rampage took it from Chuck. Then Forrest took it from Rampage. Then Evans took it from Forrest. Then Lyoto took it from Evans. Then Shogun took it from Lyoto. Then Jones took it from Shogun. And for those few years, the light heavyweight weight class really was the show class of the UFC. They're really, you had GSP, you had Anderson, you had the Brock Lesnar sideshow as long as that lasted, but 205 was their main attraction.
Yeah, it sure was. I mean, when the UFC really burst onto the scene, Rich Franklin and Tito, as you mentioned, I mean, that was the division, super action packed. I mean, they didn't even have 155 pounds. It was 170 and above back at that time in the UFC, and man, things were thriving. And as we were talking about the lineage of the 205-pound belt, you're quite right. That whole little stretch there, that really was one of the greatest stretches when Rampage beat Chuck Liddell, took the UFC belt from him. I want to say that was maybe that was his fight with Dan Henderson, where they unified the UFC and the Pride titles when Rampage beat Henderson, and then the whole trade off went Forrest beat Rampage, Rashad beat Forrest, and so on. But in that whole heyday, the Tough era, the golden age of the UFC, so to speak. I mean, Tough was still incredibly fresh when Rashad Evans was fighting on there, fighting heavyweights, won the tournament at heavyweight, and he went on to be one of the best fighters that the UFC saw for almost, I'd say, a good decade there. Really, I mean, he beat all comers, became a champion himself.
Michael Bisping, beat who else? A lot of folks.
Oh yeah, lots of solid W's there. Rashad. I mean, he just one of the preeminent names in the sport. Really, he did have a rough stretch there going through it, but yeah, I mean, he beat Dan Henderson, Chael Sonnen, Phil Davis, who's now a champ, was a brief champ in Bellator. He had lots of great victories there, and great run, one of the greatest personalities. Not everybody, especially when he first debuted, he had a little bit of a showboating style. Some people didn't necessarily care for it, but really, as far as John Jones type of outside of the cage antics, there was none of that. You never had any bad press from Rashad, and really, he he was always great in the cage. Definitely, I never took umbrage with his performances. Um, just one of the best, and he was a solid wrestler. Won a lot of his fights with his wrestling. Started converting to more of a striking style. Did very well there. And definitely had a fantastic career. He was I would say definitely still one of those figures that was crucial in helping the sport get to where it is today, just by virtue of his star power and his appeal.
Yeah, he was still undefeated when he took the belt off Forrest. Then, of course, had the infamous stanky leg fight against Lyoto Machida. Went on a win streak again, lost to John Jones. Had that really weird fight against Little Nog, where, man, you look back at that. That's one of the stranger
Worst
fights.
fight ever.
Yeah, one of the strangest fights, one of the strangest results. Just you absolutely, that fight, not that Evans should have won, but just watching that fight was just the biggest what the fuck.
It was a game of patty cake, wasn't it?
It
That was
was,
kind
yeah.
of
It was
a
like
lot of glove touching.
it looked like they were doing that improv exercise where like you try and mirror each other. It was very strange. Then gets a couple wins against Dan Henderson and Chael Sonnen. Took a couple years off, and since then 0-5, including 2 fights at middleweight, and then most recently a few weeks ago against Anthony Smith, hangs it up as a surefire Hall of Famer. The next guy also hanging up his gloves, maybe a Hall of Famer, but I don't know if it's as locked in. And I'm talking about Big Rig. The Oklahoman Johny Hendricks finishes his career 18-8 after very similarly to Rashad Evans, just hitting a hard downslide, going 2-6 dating back to 2014. He had that couple year period where he was just dropping everyone. Knocked out T.J. Waldberger in the first round, John Fitch in 12 seconds. Knocked out Martin Kampman, sent him across the cage in under a minute. Got that decision against Condit. Then had that very controversial split decision loss against GSP. GSP retires. He wins the belt against Lawler, then loses it in another controversial split decision. Was floating around, and then around 2015, he beats Matt Brown, and I'll go ahead and say it. USADA kicks in. And all of a sudden, that special magical power that Johny Hendricks had to just absolutely wallop you and finish the fight, it disappeared. And since then, he's lost to Stephen Thompson, Kelvin Gastelum, Neil Magny, Tim Boach, and most recently Paulo Costa last November. His only win, a unanimous decision victory against Hector Lombard, who also mysteriously had knockout power disappear around the same time when they started doing USADA random drug testing. Coincidentally, I should add. I guess the big 2 questions here, I guess the first thing I think of when I think of Johnny is that fight against GSP. That actually was the first UFC fight I ever went to, and that short but strange title run where he fought Lawler back to back in 2014 and won the vacant title, and just as quickly as he won it, lost it 9 months down the road. And oh man, if he makes the Hall of Fame or not, I say throw him in there just because man, he kind of did end the active part of GSP's career. I think GSP being in a fight that close kind of made him realize that the new guard were on their way in. I say go ahead and include him. Why not? We kind of have yet to see how big and how inclusive the UFC's Hall of Fame will be, but I think Johnny Hendricks, whether he's inducted or not, will be a good indicator of it. Um, I guess that was my eulogy for the UFC career of Johnny Hendricks. You have anything to say about him?
Well, I was definitely a big fan of the big rig. I mean, when he was on top of his game, he was on top of his game. Him, Rick Story, Mike Pierce, all kind of cut from the same cloth. Super strong wrestlers, diamond granite chins that were just impenetrable, super heavy hands. And actually, I liked watching all those gentlemen's respective fights with one another. Um, but he he did seem to have some issues there. Now, to be fair to Johnny, I want to say USADA testing didn't start at the UFC till 2015, if I recall correctly. And the last time he knocked someone out was actually against Martin Kampmann in 2012. So even with a couple years between that fight and um, USADA testing, he wasn't able to knock anybody out. Even with a few-year gap of non-USADA testing there, he did legitimately fuck up his bicep tendon. And I think that, I don't know, perhaps that did a lot of damage to his power in the years going forward. But certainly there's been a lot of USADA speculations. Now, one thing you could absolutely point to post-USADA is Johnny missing weight. Because once USADA did kick in, Johnny just couldn't make weight anymore. I don't know what the correlation is between that, but yeah, 3 of his last 5 bouts, he missed weight. Even moving up to middleweight, he missed weight. So who knows what happened there? Whether or not he gets in the Hall of Fame is such a tricky one. Johnny Hendricks, I feel like he was that bright star that just burned out hella quick. He ended up getting the belt. Should have gotten it rightfully from GSP. That decision was still just a fuck job. And deservedly won it from Lawler. Should have kept it against Lawler. I don't know. Again, that was just another one of the greatest fuck jobs in UFC history. Just terrible decisions. I mean, if for nothing else, he should get into the UFC Hall of Fame for just being one of the most screwed over guys as far as decisions go in UFC history. But really, with all the weight misses, and he really wasn't on top for that long. But I don't know. It's a tricky one. Then again, because it's like, well, only reason he wasn't on top was because he got screwed out of that title when Robbie Lawler was gifted a fight against him. So yeah, I don't whether or not he deserves to be in there. I don't know. That's a real tough one with me. I could see that going either way. I wouldn't be upset if he wasn't in there. I don't think I'd be too pissed if he was either.
A guy who I think will probably make it in the Hall of Fame. Lyoto Machida, another guy who has been accused. I think it was Gegard Mousasi who said he was coming over to Bellator to avoid USADA testing. But yeah, we got Lyoto Machida, the Dragon, coming into Bellator. I don't know if it's going to be at 185 or 205, but how interesting would a fight be? I don't know, maybe line Lyoto up with just like an easy fight, easy fight, get a quick knockout in front of the Bellator fans, line him up with the winner of Rory McDonald and Gegard Mousasi. That'd be fun. Gegard's all already talking a little bit of that shit. I don't know. I don't think, obviously it's very recent news that he's going over to Bellator, and I don't want to eulogize his career yet, but what do you think about Lyoto Machida, who, a lot of fighters make a big deal about it, will, announce to the world that, this will be the last fight in their contract, and they will not be re-signing. Lyoto did this kind of quietly. He didn't make a lot of waves. It was just all of a sudden, oh, Lyoto's going to Bellator? What? What do you make of this, and what do you think would be a good play by Bellator as far as working in him into the mix now of a lot of ex UFC fighters?
Well, you're right, Jake. This was very quiet and for me pretty unexpected too. I personally would have thought that either Lyoto Machida would have either stayed in the UFC or just retired. I mean, um, granted, his split decision win over Eric Anders in his fight before last was fairly questionable, but technically had the or has the 2 fight winning streak going on. Got a fight of the night bonus for front kicking Vitor Belfort's face off, and you would think maybe he would stick it out with the UFC, but if Bellator is making him what I believe he was quoted as saying an offer he couldn't refuse, um, I mean, heck, why not go with it? I mean, Machida. I mean, Machida, that's got to be an offer that he can't refuse because it's not like the UFC has not been paying him. In Machida's disclosed paydays, I mean, he hasn't made less than a quarter million in some time for a fight, and most of his fights aren't even disclosed as to how much he makes. But UFC's got to be paying him pretty decent. He was certainly one of their biggest stars. They never banked on anyone more than Lyoto Machida in the Dragon era and everything like that back in the day. Oh my God, no one ever had any more hype. And oh, I bought into it. I was drinking that Kool-Aid too. I think Machida would definitely have a spot in the Hall of Fame. I mean, again, just like Rashad Evans for his prominence during that time for the draw that he brought in. But yeah, so surprising to see him move over to Bellator. I mean, maybe it's a good move for him. I mean, it seems to be pretty common. The UFC fighters go over there, take some titles. I mean, I want to say Ryan Bader's the 205-pound champion. Lyoto Machida knocked him out handily. Maybe he's eyeballing some of those titles over there, saying, "Hey, why don't I just go get some nice paydays and make some good money? Maybe get that juice flowing freely, that dragon juice going, and just ride off into the sunset for your last couple of years." I mean, smart move by him. He's really not going to be. It's not like he's going to be any less visible of a figure. Bellator's already had a pretty good presence in MMA, and it seems to be just growing more and more every day. So it seems like a pretty good move for Machida, if you ask me.
And I guess last topic, speaking of the dragon juice, Vitor Belfort on his Instagram appears to be on lots and lots of the dragon juice. Uh, God, we saw it in
That ain't
his
Nutella.
we saw it his last UFC weigh-in, looking pretty drawn out, looking like old man Vitor, looking like the steroids he once pumped himself full of was now a deflated TRT Vitor. Well, now that he is retired, he whipped that bike pump back out and reinflated himself the fuck back up. Just go and look at his Instagram, which I believe is just Vitor Belfort. The man is back on the TRT. The man is fully on the magma. The man is dripping steroids out of his eyeballs. And to me, I hope this means we get to see him in another promotion and go back to full TRT Vitor status of destroying any man who dares step in front of him. That was it. It was a little annoying when it was in the UFC, and it's like the premier level of fighting, and you got this guy just absolutely juiced to the gills. But somewhere like Bellator or Risen, where the belts aren't necessarily that prestigious, go ahead, juice up. He seemed to be sincere when he talked about his retirement before, but he would not be the first, nor second, nor third, nor thousandth person to claim retirement and then jump back in the cage in another promotion. So I bet we see Vitor back as early as later this year. What were your thoughts when you saw that photo of Vitor Belfort back on the Magma?
Oh my God, Jake. I can't tell you the smile that was on my face when you actually sent me that picture. I had not seen that on the gram, and holy smokes, that was just. I laughed my ass off. The first thing I started thinking is Ryzen has to sign him, and it's him versus Bob Sapp. Give Vitor all the TRT he wants. Give Bob Sapp like some PCP or something, and just let's have a great time. Throw it on a New Year's Eve card. Put it on one of the circus events. Oh my goodness, TRT Vitor is why is he so much more of a beast than non TRT Vitor? I mean, I guess the answer's in the gimmick, my man.
The
It's
TRT.
it's that's it. It's that liquid hot magma, that gimmick that's just that's just irradiating from his essence. It's amazing. It's an amazing. He's a great creature. It's like watching TRT Vitor is like just a National Geographic type of situation. Just watching a lion take down a gazelle type of situation. Yeah, do I want to see him juiced to the gills in the UFC? It's one of those things. I myself would prefer the UFC remain a PED free place, or well, I guess you have to be PED free before you can remain PED free. But anyways, I would like for it to attempt to be a clean sport. But yeah, for the circus freak fights, for the old legend fights, as long as they're able to clear extensive medicals, I don't want people dying a month later, as we've seen happen in Bellator fights before, with people who are far too old or people who just have no business belonging in the cage. Certainly don't want that, but Vitor and Lyoto, I'll lump them in there too. Screw it. These guys have been trained fighters their entire lives, and they're probably not inexperienced with the gimmick. Screw it. Let them go for it. If they can pass those physicals, it's these other promotions are good for some entertainment like that. So, oh, bless his heart. My favorite part too is just the Instagram. He says, wait a second. I've got to pull this up just for posterity. And for the fans, in case they haven't seen it yet,
Yo, that man's
Vitor
eyeballs
Belfort.
looked yellow in that picture.
Oh my God! So he says, well, and me reading directly, my NOG fighter. I'm not from a Nutella generation. And then he basically repeats himself in Portuguese. So I'm like, you're basically just saying, yeah, this is the gimmick. I'm shooting up those roids. This ain't the horse meat. He's not fronting like over him. He's saying, yeah, I'm a real fighter. Real fighters do steroids. That's what I'm
Yeah.
taking from it.
He
And
he isn't on
bless his heart.
he
Bless
isn't
his
on
heart.
the Nutella generation. This man's on the Winstraw generation, son. Let's go. That human growth hormone generation.
Woo. That
Oh
deep ball
man.
generation.
Love it. Love it. Well, hey, that's the end of this show. We'll be back this weekend. Looking ahead to the cards and fights we are most looking forward to for July 2017. For Sweet Pappy Jones, thanks for listening to the MMA podcast. We'll catch you soon. Till then, we gone.